Hi everybody, I hope you're doing marvelously well. It is no surprise to make this statement. Bob Clearmountain is inarguably the greatest mixer ever. Okay, you might disagree with me, but pretty much every major mixer I can name checks Bob Clearmountain as the greatest mixer alive. He mixed Woman in Chains. He mixed and he produced and engineered and mixed all of those huge Bryan Adams records. He was the engineer on Chic and Sister Sledge. I mean, this guy's resume is insane. I'm like scraping the surface of the surface of the surface. And as I've said, every mixer I know, he's our favorite mixer. So when Bob Clearmountain, who is really well known for mixing in surround, decides that he wants to also update his room and turn it into an Atmos room, and also do it in a different way to everybody else, we all take notice. So we went over there and we talked to Bob about his Atmos mixing room. And there's something that you've been asking me about, and that is his 16 compressor method. Yes, he uses 16 compressors, 8 stereos, 16 monos, however you want to look at it, in his whole system. So he's going to describe that. And I've got to tell you, listening to the way Bob is mixing in Atmos, in Immersive, let's be more broad about this, because it's not just about Atmos, the company, Dolby Atmos. It's about an immersive experience, which is going to be for all formats. The way Bob is doing it is completely unlike anybody else's. Yes, it's got the object kind of idea, but it doesn't just feel like there's an acoustic guitar here, it's a tambourine up here, there's a shaker there. This feels like you're in the middle of the music. It feels like a stereo mix that surrounds you. It's a very, very different experience from other Atmos mixers. And I loved it. And I was blown away. I got to sit there and listen in Bob's room to some of the most amazing music that he's mixing. So let's get to Bob talking about his room, Mix This, and how he updated it and how he works in immersive audio. Let's check it out. Bob, you've been mixing surround in here for how long?
About 22 years, I think, when it first became a thing. When my wife back then, when it was a thing for about a minute, she said, "You should be mixing surround." And I was like, "Oh, surround? You gotta be kidding me." And then one more, I woke up in the middle of the night one morning at 3 a.m, and wait a minute, I know I could do that. You know, thinking about the SSL and how the routing works in the SSL. Right. And then thinking about, I bet I could expand the compressor into a surround compressor. Then I did it, and now I've been doing that ever since. Well, Atmos comes along, and what happened basically a year ago, I was asked to mix the 4th album from the band, from an album called Cahoots. I had already remixed their first 3 for all each album's 50th year anniversary. Music from Big Pink, the band, Stage Fright. I'd mix those in stereo and 5.1 surround.
I'm dying to ask you something, because I asked Shelley about music with Big Pink, because about 10 years ago I worked with this band called Augustana, and their favorite band was the band, and their favorite album was music from the Big Pink. Right. And I was struggling to get those sounds, to get modern versions.
Well, Shelley recorded a lot of that.
Yeah, and he told me, he goes, "Good luck." I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, when Levon's singing, we gave up, trying to isolate it, because he would sing and play drums." Right. He said, "So there's, I don't know, when he came to mix, he said, there's times when it's just one fader, and it's a vocal and drums."
Right, yeah.
So how was that to mix?
Yeah, it was a challenge. It was a challenge, especially if you're trying to do a 5.1 of that, and it's on 4-track,
Vocal and drums, one fader.
No, it was it was interesting because there was a drum track as well and a vocal, and so if you split them, you get this kind of a stereo drum thing, which is kind of cool.
Oh, wow. So much bleed in the vocal and a separate drum mic.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And so it in some ways, there's certain ways you could use it to your advantage, Hopefully I did. But I think it came out pretty good. But anyway, so a year ago, BMG calls me up and they said, "Okay, now it's time for the 4th band album called Cahoots. You're into doing it?" I go, "Of course." But they said, "Could you deliver an Atmos mix?" Because that's become the thing. And I went, "Atmos? okay, sure. Saying like, oh, this shouldn't be too much trouble. Luckily, we had just redone, this living room is right above us, right? We'd just redone the floors, and I had a feeling this was going to come up. And so I thought, since we got the floor open upstairs, I put some pipes in for speaker wires, for the ceiling speakers, right? And so that happened like a year before, like two or 3 years before now. So I said, okay. And so I found some more speakers. I actually had more of these Dynaudios, which I use for the 7-1 part. And then I got this little monitor controller, which I've now replaced, and with the Apogee Symphony Mark II, which works as my Pro Tools interface and monitor controller, which works really well. It's been great. And so I mixed that Cahoots album, Atmos, and then the Joe Bonamassa record, which is unbelievable.
Yeah, you played me that a couple of weeks ago. It was amazing.
It's just an amazing album, period. Incredible. I still haven't met Joe, believe it or not.
Wow.
But it's one of the best records I've mixed in years.
He played on a record I just did. I didn't
Really?
mix him either, yeah. JJ recorded it and sent it to me, yeah.
It's an unbelievable album. I mean, just in stereo, it's unbelievable. In Atmos, it's like kind of mind-boggling. If you can hear it in a proper... the headphone thing is, the spatial audio headphone thing, I don't even know what that is. I've never really heard spatial audio on a pair of headphones. But of course, the guy at Apple says, oh, if you have trained ears, you don't hear it. If you don't have trained ears, then you do hear that. It's like, okay.
Okay.
So I hope somebody's hearing that. I don't. But anyway, so that's fun. And then a few other records. I've done everything this year. Well, since then, I've done in Atmos, including these Bryan Adams recuts. I remixed a couple songs from his new album that he did on his own with his engineer. And I've done a couple of Atmos remixes for that. I've just done this Warren Haynes live album.
Oh, fantastic. What a great guitar player.
Amazing player, yeah. and just a great singer. And he did it with a full orchestra on stage. So it's live with an orchestra. And so that sounds really fun in Atmos.
The Joe Bonamassa stuff, though, is absolutely superb.
That was the second one, and I had learned a bit from doing the Cahoots record.
That kind of Kashmiri song you played.
Yeah.
If that's an adjective, Kashmiri, but yeah, I think people know what I mean. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Everybody should go out and just get that record,
Yeah.
Even if you listen in mono, it's still really good.
Yeah, he's insanely talented.
Yeah, really insanely talented. And the producer, Kevin Shirley, he's the one, because I was friends with Kevin and I had mixed a few things for him, and he's the one who asked me to do it. And just incredible production. And he did it remotely. He was quarantined in Australia because of the pandemic. He couldn't get out of Australia. So he did it online. They recorded it in New York, and they hooked up some kind of streaming thing. I don't know how he did it, but he produced the whole album from Australia to New York.
Incredible.
And did all the backing vocals. He had some singers in Sydney that he used on that, the backing vocals.
So let's talk a little bit. How do you mix in Atmos on a console? Because everybody I know that mixes in Atmos is not using a console.
In the box, yeah.
Doing it entirely in the box. A lot of people have asked me about your multiple compressor. Yeah. So there's a lot of questions here.
It's very simple because I use the bus routing for the surround. So the stereo mix is coming off the pan pots. And then the small faders, which this fader on this console can be a monitor fader, it could be another input, it could be an echo send. Basically, I put them all at 0, which is unity gain, post big fader, and that feeds the buses, which are my surround buses.
Yep.
For 5.1, I picked like 5 of those. The LFE signal comes off the aux4. So of course, then I added a couple for the, it's now 7.1, like 9 is the left side, 10 is the left front, 11 is the right front, 12 is the right rear. This is all on my website, by the way, if you go to mixthis.com.
We'll put a link down below.
There's a little diagram that explains that. But so that's pretty simple. It's a little kludgy, really, because I don't have any automated panning or anything like that. It's all static. But
so when you are doing those effects and you're moving things, though, how are you doing it?
Well, a lot of it I just do with delays.
Right.
You know, like you'll get cascading delays, or else in the Dolby renderer you can. There's 2 extra buses.
Yeah.
Like there's 4 buses, 17 through 20 are for the ceiling speakers. I have quad in the ceiling.
Yeah.
And then 21 and 22 are actually my 2 object buses, which I call them, right? And so I mean, I've only ever panned one thing at a time. I think one time I panned this pair around. Unfortunately, there's no really good panner that does that. But as I've discovered, we're thinking about making one.
Right.
But so that'll go into the Dolby renderer, and then you go and you just do a pan in Pro Tools, and then you can do anything you want. And go, well, once it's an object, you can pan it anywhere. The objects I don't concern myself with. I don't have, Atmos is designed for movies. So normally what the objects are doing are helicopters and jet planes and rockets and bullets and stuff flying all over the place. Not a lot of my records has much of any of that.
No explosions behind you?
No explosions, no rockets, bullets. And so I don't really need most of that stuff. Every now and then there'll be a wacky guitar part that you just, okay, let's swing that around the room. That'll be fun.
Well, I mean, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I want to make sure we get this out, because hearing the way you mix in Atmos is it sounds, and you said this was a compliment, so hopefully, hello, hey Walter. It feels like big stereo. It feels like you're being surrounded by the sound. It doesn't just feel like, oh, here's a tambourine, that's the acoustic guitar, there's a background over here. It actually feels all-encompassing.
Yeah, great. Well, that's good. Well, it depends on I let the music tell me what should happen pretty much, but there's certain things. I mean, most of the rhythm I keep in the front. Brian Adams had a good comment when we were working together and I was doing an Atmos mix for him. I had the rhythm guitars in the sides. I thought, well, this would be cool because and he was like, the power really should come from the front, like the stage. Think of it as the stage. And he was right, so I stuck the rhythm guitars, the power chords in the front, and then things like acoustic guitars in the sides, maybe, or incidental other things, keyboards. Keyboards are always nice in the back.
On Run to You have like the lead, then the harmony comes in, and the delay to the harmony, and
well, that's the other thing. The delays and the effects.
Yeah.
You have all this stuff, and I mean, I think of it like a live venue where the delays and are bouncing off the back of the back walls, so they're coming off the back speakers. Makes sense, or out of the ceiling. I usually have this quad ambience up there, which makes it feel like you're in a bigger place.
Incredible.
The cat wants to run the camera there.
The cat is all over Eric.
And now look, she's going to step on an AFL button, and then I'm going to go, wow, what's soloed?
What's soloed? Why?
But sorry about this.
No, this is great.
Anyway, and so that kind of thing. I always have that live. I love live music. I love going to live rock shows or anything. And whenever I go to a place, I went to see the Stones when they played at the SoFi Stadium. And the whole time, besides enjoying the Rolling Stones, thinking about, let's see, is this drummer, is he as good as Charlie? Because they have unfortunately, Charlie Watts died. But besides that, I'm listening to the sound of the arena, or the whatever it is, the stadium. And so I'm kind of making a note of that, a mental note of that. And I'm always kind of trying to get back to, it doesn't have to be a stadium, it doesn't have to be an arena, it could be a club or something like that. There's a video I mixed in 5.1, of course I'm getting away from the Atmos thing, but for the Rolling Stones, it's Muddy Waters at the Checkerboard Lounge, which is this little club, this little blues club in Chicago, where Muddy Waters used to play before he died, and obviously before he died. But the Stones walk in the middle of the show, and they sit down and have a drink, and then they eventually get up on stage. But there were just 2 audience mics, and man, you listen to this thing and watch the video, and the audience is in the back, they're behind you, and you just feel like you're there in this little smoky club, And I'm always trying to get that feeling, like you're not sitting just listening to a record or watching a video, you know.
Huge Muddy Waters fan.
Yeah, well, you should get it, because you can get on their website.
Yeah, I'll get it.
On Stone's website.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, we just did a video on Muddy Waters. Comes out next Wednesday.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh, great.
I got into it because I bought Hard Again when it came out, with Johnny Winter producing. It's such a good record. And then I just went back. I went back and got the Folk Singer. I got Newport Festival. All the records, and filled in all the gaps. I mean, insane how his timing.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
He sat in the pocket, and he just always, even when he was singing something a little depressing, he always seemed to be singing with a smile on his face.
Oh yeah, always. I know, it's true. It just makes you feel good to listen to what he was doing,
Oh.
And then you just mentioned Johnny Winter. I'm another big Johnny Winter fan, Johnny and Edgar. But Johnny in particular, he's amazing player,
Saw him, I think, at the Town and Country Club. I think it was Town and Country Club in 90, maybe 90. I had a whole spate of just going to see everybody while they were still there. You must have seen a lot of those kinds of shows in New York.
Not like blues guys, unfortunately. Right. I wish I was more aware of that. I was more aware of the white versions, But I was Johnny Winter and Edgar Winter I used to go see.
Incredible.
Mad Dogs and the Englishmen, of course, Joe Cocker. And I was really into British rock, because it's funny, because being an American, I learned about American blues from British people.
Yeah, we just wanted to be black American bluesmen. That's what we wanted to be, yeah.
We had this thing called the Capitol Theater, which is still going, I think, in Portchester, New York. And I'd go down there, we'd sneak in the back door, because I couldn't afford the tickets.
Yeah.
Not that anybody should do that, by the way. Well, first of all, there's a couple things. There's a 16-channel compressor. The stereo compressor in the board, the SSL, it's quite famous for how it sounds, and I've just always loved it ever since I've been mixing on SSLs. I've been using that. And then when surround came along, we expanded it to 5 channels, because there's 8 extra VCAs. It's all VCA based, so they're all the same VCAs, but there are 8 extra ones for these patchable VCAs for these faders. Now, if you disconnect them from the faders, I slaved them off of the DC voltage coming out of the compressor. So if there's a stereo, as long as there's a stereo mix going into that, the surround compressor just mimics that. So we just patch the surround buses through these extra VCAs. The faders no longer do anything, so I could still use these for grouping, for soft groups. But then when Atmos came along, I thought, okay, now what are we gonna do? Because like I'm out, I've used all but 2 of the extra VCAs in the board, and so my assistant Brandon, who is brilliant, goes on does a little search on the internet, and there's a site called Reverb, and he finds a thing called the Euro Rack, which is where these VCA cards live in the SSL underneath all this stuff. Yeah. And there was one for sale that was exactly what we needed. It just happened to be that we found one, and it wasn't even that expensive, and it's hiding down there. You could see it in the leg of the center leg, that thing. That's the Euro Rack. And it's got 4 stereo VCA cards in it. And so we tied that all together with this. And then with the help of Lucas Vandermeer at Apogee, who's the analog guy, he's the reason Apogee stuff sounds so good, really. It's the analog front and back end that he designs, and he designs the preamps, which are amazing. The guy's just a brilliant, absolute brilliant freak of nature. He's so talented. And so he and Brandon figured out what this had to be. They included 3 controls here, so I could do less. For some of the live stuff, what happens, they'll be hitting the compressor pretty hard for the music, but then if you go listen to the audience back here, you hear it kind of pumping in and out. So that way I can reduce how much compression by 10% on each click for the side speakers, the rear speakers, or the overhead speakers. Side, rear, overhead. And So that's a pretty nice advantage too. So I can really contour the compression to the music, and that really works well. And then the other thing is that, okay, now how do you control all those speakers? Now I had rented a very expensive monitor controller from a company called Grace, and it was all Dante hooked up, and it was massively complicated, and it was just too much for my head to deal with. And then my wife said, well, why aren't you using our device, our Symphony Mark II? Because that can do surround monitoring. And I go, oh, okay. And we had to hook it up completely differently than what I had going. So the Grace went back. I mean, the Grace box is very good for what it does. It's very expensive, though. This is quite a bit less expensive. So this is just a remote for one of these. It's not this one, but there's one back in the machine room that this thing's controlling. And so that's now the monitor controller. Controls all 12 channels for monitoring. They're just about to come out with a new software update for the Symphony Control, so that makes it a little more convenient if you want to switch to stereo. So you can have 2 or 3 pairs of stereo speakers just with the click of one of these buttons. And right now I have to kind of go for stereo, I have to go back to this SSL monitoring, which is a little bit kludgy, but they're nearly done with that, and probably within the next month that'll be released, and it's going to be fantastic. And plus it's a great converter that sounds incredible. I mean, really, I don't mean to put down Michael Grace at all, because he's brilliant, but I actually think this sounds a little bit better. When we switched to this, I liked it more. You want to know what every one of those patch cords does?
Sure.
Well, when you find out, please let me know.
Yeah, I know. How often do we repatch our patch bay?
There's only like one thing that we ever repatched, nothing else.
Yeah,
I've never seen anything else touched.
Once everything's patched in, why do you need to change it?
Yeah, I know.
It gets a little bit dusty.
Yeah. I mean, the things we patch are just the inserts, which isn't that much, a compressor or EQ or something like that. That's about it. I mean, just in the last year, we keep changing things, the way the monitoring changed, and just the way we sync. Because I have two systems. I have a multi-track rig, Pro Tools multi-track rig, which is 16 in 80 channels out, 80 D to A's. Then there's the print rig, which is 16 in and out. And they're all synced together. I have 2 Big Ben, Apogee Big Bens, and the multi-track rig is clocked off. So word clock from that runs the multi-track rig. So that sample rate has to agree with the session. But then that's putting out Blackburst video sync to the other Big Ben in the machine room, which is running the print rig, right? And then time code is coming from Sync HD from the multi-track rig into this Apogee Mini-Me here, which is plugged through USB into the print rig, and then that goes into a nice little. This is pretty new actually for me. This is like a time code reader, and it takes in SMPTE, turns it into MIDI timecode internally, and sends it into Pro Tools. And so they're locked together with timecode, but they're also locked together with video sync. So the sample rate can be different. Like right now, this is at 48K, but this rig is always at 96.
Because you're running analog, you can print back.
Yeah, because it's analog. So there's an automatic SRC sample rate conversion via analog. It works. It seems to work. I mean, I was using a Motu device to convert SMPTE to MIDI timecode, but it would drop out for some reason. I don't know why. And somebody suggested this little app, and that seems to work quite a bit better. And a lot of people ask, well, why do you do it on a separate rig? Well, first of all, Atmos is 12 channels just for the Atmos mix, and then there's stereo, so it's always 14 channels I'm always printing in there. And then there's all the different versions, which is just print stereo, the vocal up and vocal down, I print stereo. There's an instrumental, there's the a cappella version, the TV track. So it ends up to being a lot of tracks. It's just easier to keep it separate that way. And then the renderer is just on this machine over here, the Dolby renderer. which has to be in there. That's running on the same machine. I've just done it that way for years and years, and it's just easier on my brain rather than finding channels on your multi-track, and then you start to run out of voices and stuff like that. And
I presume you can have a template.
Well, that's true. We have a template. Yeah, there's actually that's exactly right. Yeah. Which is great for me because, man, it gets complicated because for the Atmos thing, there's these sends and returns plugins, and I let my assistant Brandon figure that shit out. Yeah, these little speakers in the ceiling, they're actually designed they're consumer Atmos speakers, but they're really designed to put on top of your stereo speakers to bounce off the ceiling. But it wouldn't work in here because of all this diffusion, and so you wouldn't get a proper.
Right.
It really wouldn't work. So I wanted something very small, a passive speaker, because my ceiling's so low, it's 8-foot ceiling.
They're probably inexpensive, aren't they, relatively?
Yeah, they're like $200 or something. No, they're not expensive at all, or $150. But they're pretty good. They sound decent. I mean, they're not a Dyne Audio or anything like that, but for what I put up there, they work fine. And, I have a little 4-channel amp back in the machine room that powers them. And it works great. I don't have to run power up there. They're passive, so I don't have to run power up there. I just moved these ahead. They used to be back here. And then I moved them up a little bit just to separate them.
I have to find out where those come from. I'll ask Brandon, because
found them on the internet,
What are you powering them with?
This amplifier by a company called Art, and it's just a 4-channel amp.
Right.
The 1U rack mount thing back there. And it's all good, but the Apogee Symphony Mark II it's just turned out to be tremendous because that was already my interface for the print rig. And so all I had to do was wire it differently.
Right.
So it was not a big deal at all. And then I got rid of I used to have the renderer used to be on a separate computer. They were tied together with Dante. I had Dante in the Apogee Mark II that ran into the Grace thing. And the trouble with that, one of the trouble was that I mix everything at 96K. Atmos only works at 48K. And so I can mix at it, but then you have to convert it to create an Atmos file. And then to play back an Atmos file, an actual ADM file, it can't play back 96K, it has to play back in 48. So now your whole system has to change to 48K, including the monitor controller. And it was just a nightmare. And then getting it back to normal was another nightmare. I'm a mixer. I'm a kind of a part-time tech, maybe a little bit, just from what I've picked up from hanging around the shop at Power Station or A&M, but not that much. And so I don't want to have to deal with all this nonsense. And so this thing's great because it's all just works. It plays back. You just have to switch the sample rate well, actually, you don't have to switch. I think just in the render, you just have to switch the sample rate, or where it'll just auto-detect if you're trying to play back a file. And that's it. And then the Apogee just changes to whatever that thing's doing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking us through.
Yeah, sure. It's great. I feel bad because I don't know who else could actually put together a 16-channel analog compressor. It sounds so good. That's the thing. And it just works. I mean, I'm sure it could be done. I'm sure somebody could do it if they bothered. But everybody mixes in the box. And I'm sure I'm hoping that Apogee actually will come out with a 12 or 16 channel version of their mod comp. That would be great. I'm sort of pushing them in that direction.
That's a good idea.
There's other ones. I mean, there are ones already out there that will do that. Probably don't sound quite like this, but
yeah. Actually, it was on when I just put a photo of you and me up on Instagram. That was asked a lot.
Yeah,
asked that question about this. So.
Yeah, well, there's quite a bit to it. I'm really lucky that I happen that somebody that works for my wife is like an analog genius. Right.
That helps a lot. Yeah,
that helps a lot. I am lucky. I admit. I'm sorry, but I'm very lucky. But I've been doing this a long time, so I don't know. maybe hopefully I deserve it.
Yes, you do. Well, thank you ever so much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Leave any comments and questions below. Goodbye. So long, farewell. Auf Wiedersehen. Au revoir.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.